So there are two policies that came in 2004. One was the civic arts policy, and the other one was the public art policy.
Okay.
The civic art policy really was, to all intents and purposes, it was the rationale for the creation of Calgary Arts Development Authority, which is essentially the arm's length funding agency of the City of Calgary. So in many other jurisdictions it might be called an arts council. So that's really what the civic arts policy addressed. The public art policy was very much aimed at the capital spend of the City of Calgary and how public art would be a part of that capital spend. So they're quite separate and distinct policies. One is about a broad reach and support of arts organizations and artists generally across the city, and the other one is very much about a city-driven policy and plan. So then looking at what other cities had done in their approach, the notion of having master plans, out of which then might come other plans, was again very strong. Calgary didn't start with a master plan. It started with a policy. Interestingly enough, many cities start with a plan, which then provokes the creation of a policy. Calgary kind of did it the other way around. So they did a policy, and the policy gives a very broad framework as to what they're talking about in terms of public art. So the City of Calgary, when it's talking about public art, is talking about permanent, it's talking about temporary, it's talking about all different kinds of media, and talking about functional art, so bike racks and benches and all those kinds of things. So it really left it very wide open in terms of what could be created in terms of this 1% policy. But it didn't develop a public art master plan. And so UEP was unique within the departments to decide that it would then, post-policy, develop a plan of action and to how they actually wanted to use the policy. And so when we were revisiting the policy in 2013, this notion of actually having a broad plan for each department, and in fact even business units, became, people could really see the value in doing that. And so a lot of other areas have decided that they would like to follow in the footsteps of UEP and develop a plan. And the notion there was that there was a feeling that there's a lot of education about the environment and the importance of water in this environment, especially in this province where water is actually not in great supply, and people are not that familiar with that. And so there was a sense that artists could help tell the story in a way that perhaps engineers are not as compelling, engineers and scientists. And so I think there was a really interesting focus on what are the challenges of ensuring that citizens are aware of the, really the fragility of the water system. And so Watershed Plus was a great way to embed artists who, in their learning about all of the challenges, would be people who have a different way of expressing those issues. This is where I think the credit to the UEP Public Art Plan is an important piece, because I think the idea of planning, of thinking through in a very general way, what are we trying to accomplish, to try and get some themes and some ideas. And then within that plan there are also suggestions of placement and that kind of thing. And so with all of that behind, then you're ready to say to an artist, we'd really like you to think about how you might engage with this. And I think that's helped to inform the way the other departments have thought about things. And certainly when we were developing the Public Art Master Plan, that became a very key part of the thinking that instead of hiring artists on the basis of a proposal, that we were hiring on the basis of qualifications and enabling them to then make the choices or make the proposals based on a much more intimate knowledge of the space and the need in that particular community. And I think there's quite a bit of interest in that now. I've even had general managers say to me, well, couldn't we just have artisan residents embedded in the whole corporation?
Oh, that's great.
From the point of view of the, you know, what might the City of Calgary want to be getting different perspectives on in terms of speaking with citizens. When revisiting the policy in 2013 and then developing the master plan in 2015, 2014 and 15, there's a lot of interest in that approach and having artists in residence, artists that are actually embedded in some aspect of the business, and it depends on what that business is. But there is a great deal of interest in that from other departments. It hasn't happened as of yet, although the public art program itself, we are about to launch artists in residence in the community, where we're going to actually have an artist embedded in Fire Station number 6, I think, and in the heart of a community. And the notion is that that can be very much a community development kind of process as well. I mean, from the point of view of the Arts and Culture Division, of course, it's a great bringing together of the two major areas, one of which is festivals and events, and the other is public art. In terms of being able to provide drinking water at events with these fountains, they've been very much embraced by citizens. They love them. And my understanding is that there are quite a few cities that would like to borrow them, or at least borrow the idea. And so I think that was a really interesting and clever idea in terms of, from the water department's perspective, encouraging people to understand that, in fact, once our water is treated, it's potable, whether it comes out of a fire hydrant or a tap. And so that was a great kind of educational piece. It's a fun piece because of the way the 3 different fountains have 3 different personalities, the strangers, the family. And, so different ways of approaching people in a social setting, which is quite fun and which people really enjoy. And they look forward to seeing them set up around the festivals and event sites. There's been a tremendous growth of the arts and culture community actually staying in Calgary. For many years, people left
because the creative opportunities weren't here. Yeah.
And so, so I think when you're building, when that community gets built and is more welcoming and people are included within it, it means that there's much more activity and much more room for different approaches and different perspectives. I think that there is an understanding when we did research, which we did citizen research in terms of public art particularly. And there is a real feeling that public art's important. It's important to have art in our public spaces. There's a feeling of pride. There's a feeling of expectation that if Calgary is going to be, you know, a real city, that it will embrace art in all of its public domain. It's very typical of cities, and we're not dissimilar, that there's a kind of cultural district. But there's quite an appetite in Calgary for there to be not just a strong kind of central area where there's a lot happening and a lot of activity, but also to have opportunities to create art and welcome art and attend art and that kind of thing in communities, in neighborhoods around the city.